Aloha Maikako. My name is Sarah Lee. I am a first year master's student.
And I'm Noah Ragonis, second year NEM student.
And we're so excited to have Luka here today. Luka Zavas is originally from California, but moved to Oahu when she was 3 years old and has been in Oahu since then. Originally, she was telling us she was excited about furry cats and furry animals, but took a little bit of a detour, did some teaching, did a bunch of different jobs, and now is a bird studier and lover and appreciator. You can see her jewelry and her keychains all have put on them. So through and through. And yeah, since she started, she went to undergrad in Colorado, more mammals there. And then working with the Alai Ula really brought her home and kind of was the catalyst to now she's doing.
Professionally, she also graduated like the Zavas will eventually do here at NREM 2021 in NREM. And she's currently the outreach manager with the American Bird Conservancy. So if you could join me in welcoming Luka Zavas. Yeah.
Hello, Maikako, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so happy to be back. I can remember being right over there, like not too long ago. I kind of wish I ended my college career in this instead of online and Zoom, but it's really nice to be able to see everybody in person again. Before I start, I did bring some guests with me. And it's not my favorite way of seeing the birds, but it's a very stark way of seeing them to understand like what we are losing. So this is EEV. Just gonna put them here. Oh, don't mind me, sorry. This one's Amakihi. You're welcome to come up and look at them afterwards. And I'm sorry people on Zoom, I don't know if you can see them. But this is Apapane. And it's really to think about that if we don't do something, that these pictures and these images, these videos that we have, which are wonderful and they're amazing, but to be able to see a real honeycreeper, it might be only this. A specimen stuffed or carved in a museum behind glass and not ever being able to hear them or see them fly. And so that's who we're working with and who we're trying to save here today. So I don't think it's gonna sound, but just imagine for me for a second. We're gonna go back a couple million years ago. And you're just going to listen and hear the chorus of the birds calling. You have the EEV going like a or an akohe going cha cha or and just like this chorus of sound following and listening to your ear. Hawaii was the bird paradise. It was first inhabited by birds. You know, you had to come with your wings through the waves or the wind. And this one family of Asian rosefinch flew off Asia someday, went on a little bit of a trip and ended up here in Hawaii when Ni'ihau and Kauai were still first being birthed out of the sea. So they and their ancestors and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren and how many generations we are at now watched each island come up, helped to facilitate the dispersal of the different trees, the plants, and built these really strong relationships with one another. And these relationships weren't just biocultural relationships with the scientific term, but in like pilina. And pilina isn't just like a one-time thing. It's something that's built over many, many times of many, many interactions with one another, whether they're good interactions or bad interactions. That is how you build pilina, or a long reciprocal relationship with one another. And so culturally, the reciprocal relationship was through watching them and hearing what they were saying, the birds, hearing what the birds were saying as Hawaiians got to know and as they kiloed and took observations of what a healthy forest looked like, how did the birds interact within it, what plants did they seem to go to all the time, at what time of the year, and just taking in all that information. And then over time, through that establishment of their pilina, started incorporating them into their olelo no eas or their proverbs, into their songs. They're being allegories for lovers or for fighters or for being a little kolohe or a little rascal. That was all encaptured in these birds and the different types of birds that we had. And then these birds also are being able to do something that we can't do unless we have a big machine and a lot of gas and basically strap ourselves into something that can explode. They can fly. And this flight, it allows them to go from the wao of a kanaka, or the place that we are and where we are, to the wao Akua, which is the realm of the gods. And that's usually up in the high elevation forest where the clouds touch. And so the birds going back and forth and just being the facilitators of such a great, beautiful biodiversity that was captured and incorporated. And so feathered standards, like for example, the ahu'ula that you see there. If you imagine the yellow came from the o'o is a blackbird with 2 yellow feathers usually, which means that you only took maybe 1 feather from each bird every year. So when you look at this, you're looking at generations of birds donating their feathers, generations of kia'imanu going out into the forest and gathering these, and then generations of weavers weaving this ahu'ula together to create it. So not only is it just the bird's mana or power in that, but also all of those different people that stepped in along the way and wove it together for whatever purpose it had. And I learned recently that as different ali'i fell throughout the conquest and warring between one another, they would take apart the ahu'ula and then reincorporate it again, so that they kind of like took the mana from the old, but bestowed it upon themselves to carry on as they were now the new leadership. And I can go on and on, but I have to move on into my presentation. But they're manifestations of the god. They are kino lao, or body form. They're also representations of the god Ku. And then also, as I said, pollination, seed dispersal, and insect control. Is all of these different jobs and relationships that they were able to have, and reciprocal ones between the plants and the people. And so we had over 55 different species of honeycreepers at one time. And then unfortunately, we're down to 17. And I'm going to introduce you guys to 12 of them. And if you could just say their names after me, and we can practice. And they have color coded. So purple is for Kauai, pink is for Maui, red is for Hawaii Island, and white is kind of found on most islands. So we have the Akikiki, Akeke'e, Anianiao, Amakihi. So this is the Kauai Amakihi. We also have an Oahu Amakihi and a Hawaii Amakihi. Kohe Kohe, Kiwi Q, Alawahio, Halila, Akiapo La'au, Akepa, Alavi, and I'iwi. And a lot of these, unfortunately, are basically on the brink of extinction. Their populations have been declining for a very long time, and now is like kind of hitting that crashing point, the tipping point. And I'm going to highlight 4, or not. So I'm going to highlight 4 physically. So you see the Akikiki there and the Akeke'e. If you were to talk to me maybe 5 years ago, I would have told you they're diminishing, but they're doing okay. At the beginning of the year, I would have told you there's 50 of them left. Unfortunately now, we don't think there's any, maybe like 5 or so out in the wild, because they just disappeared slowly. Their songs have disappeared out of the forest. Our crews out in Kauai up at the Kalaka'i Plateau are talking about there's just silence. The forests are silent, there's nobody singing. And in these places where the birds were abundant, they knew them so well that they knew which trees these individual birds had. They gave names to these birds because of that relationship that they had. And they're gone because of, unfortunately, just the effects of climate change and human disturbance, and what I'm going to go into next of our disaster duo. The Akeke'e is soon behind. There's about 600-ish of them. The Akohe is about 1,600, and the Kiwi is about 150. And so these are all slated to disappear sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, with the Akikiki going to be functionally extinct this year. And the rest are soon following the trend, soon going to disappear right after them if we don't do something. And so these Hawaiian honeycreepers do face the same threats that a lot of other endangered birds do. Predators, habitat loss, invasive species like ginger overtaking the bottom of the forest. But the main one and the main driver for them is mosquitoes and avian malaria, not human malaria, we don't have that here, but avian malaria. And so we once were mosquito free. Before 1826, you wouldn't have been bit by a mosquito. In the New Pepa and in old newspapers, you actually see people saying like, hey, there's this new black fly, it buzzes weird and it bites me. And so through the research, we were found that the whaling industry, unfortunately, a ship had come from South America, came over here, landed in Lahaina, Maui, and then they decided that they wanted some, fresh water because they just went on a very long trip, took the barrels out, and there were egg larvae in there, or maybe a little bit of the swimmers, released it out into what was a wetland, a beautiful wetland at the time, and from there, the mosquitoes just spread. Now, mosquitoes in themselves aren't a bad thing, they're just really good vectors of diseases, and avian malaria was introduced to the Hawaiian Islands with the import of non-native birds such as the warbling white-eye or Japanese white-eye or the cardinals. And these birds, from where they come from, there are diseases. So their immune system knows what to do if they get sick. Our Hawaiian honeycreepers evolved away from disease. So their immune system either forgot or they never learned how to deal with these kinds of diseases. So once they were introduced, they started dropping and they essentially disappeared from the low elevations, and they were only found refuge up in the high elevation forests because mosquitoes and the malaria parasite need warmer temperatures to complete the life cycle. So the high elevation forests on Kauai, Maui, and Hawaii Island were kind of like a kipuka or a little bastion for them to be safe. But we are now facing times of increased warmth. It's getting warmer. And so the mosquitoes are moving up and up and up, and our birds are running out of space. If you think back on it, the kiwikiu, which I showed back in 2019, they were doing a huge push, and they've been planning for a while of moving the kiwikiu from one side of Haleakala to the other side of Haleakala, where they had put up a fence, replanted beautiful, pristine, nicely restored native forest, released the kiwikius. And unfortunately, that project failed because at the time when they had surveyed the spot, they did not find any mosquitoes. But by the time the project went through and we were able to put the birds out there, mosquitoes had made it and they had transmitted avian malaria and the birds were not able to survive. There was one or two that made it back, but overall the project had failed. And that's when we really realized that just translocation of birds around, at least on the island scale, is not possible, especially for the birds on Maui and Kauai. And so I just want to show you the Akipiki because talking about them and still pictures of them just doesn't do the justice of who they are. So anyways, this is the Akipiki. So what can we do to prevent their extinction? So ongoing efforts, like we've been saying, is habitat restoration and protection, predator control from the rats, the cats, some mongooses. And then hoofed animal control, pigs and ungulates can cause disturbance underneath, but they also like to make a lot of wallows, which then mosquitoes like to lay their eggs in, so then it becomes another breeding habitat. And so we've been working on managing mosquito larval habitat. So Along our trails, if we have a lot of divots from cars, we would fill it back in with rocks. We are fencing out the pigs, filling back in their wallows. But if you guys have been to a native forest, you know that it is just filled with water. There are pockets everywhere, even in the rocks, there's little pools of water, in the ohia, little nubs, there's pools of water. And the southern house mosquito only needs like 1 or 2 centimeters worth, a really tiny bit of water to be able to lay their eggs for the eggs to complete the life cycle. So even with the fencing and the removal, it wasn't enough. And so it was identified, at least from the 60s, that mosquitoes were a problem, but there wasn't anything that we can do. The tools that we had were insecticides, and people have been there, done that, realize it's not really that great, especially when we have a lot of other endangered insects that could be, harmed by just spraying out all the insecticides. And so we were looking and conservationists were looking for a way to help protect the birds at a landscape scale. So like over their critical habitat up at Haleakala or over the Alaka'i Plateau on Kauai. And in addition to making sure that the populations that we had in captivity, like the Akikiki, Kiwikiu, and Akohekohe, and Tamakeke'e, were stable and safe and kind of acting like a safe haven, type like a Noah's Ark to keep them safe until we were able to address the mosquitoes and release them back into the wild, because we don't want to keep them there. They don't want to stay there. And we want them back out into the wild where they belong, and that's where their home is. And so in 2017, a bunch of different government, state, federal, nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations came together and were like, all right, mosquito-free Hawaii, what do we got to do? How can we get there? And they all came together under the banner of Birds Not Mosquitoes. And they looked around and they looked into the health sector, into the human health, because if you guys didn't know, mosquitoes are also the #1 killers of humans because they spread a lot of human diseases like dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and human malaria. And so looking over to the human sector, we saw that they had a lot of different tools. And one of the tools that we were interested in is where they use a bacteria and the interactions or the relationships that that bacteria had with the mosquitoes. And that bacteria is called Wolbachia. Can you say Wolbachia? Wolbachia. And so Wolbachia is really very, very, very tiny. It lives inside of the cytoplasm of the cell, so that jelly liquid inside of a cell. It is found in over 50 to 60% of all insect species worldwide, and it cannot live in humans, mammals, fish, or birds. And it's already found here in both native and non-native insects in Hawaii. If you guys had ever walked outside, got bit by a mosquito, you got bit by a mosquito that had Wolbachia in it. Have you ever touched a fruit fly? Also had Wolbachia. So it's in around us and amongst us, but it's very specific to the insect species that it has that relationship with. And we're interested in it because of the way that it can influence reproduction in the mosquitoes. So like I said, we have bacteria. So just like if I was to get sick, I could take antibiotics and then I could eat Activia or something to help reintroduce good bacteria back into my gut. And kind of similar, but not quite exactly the same, is what we're looking for the mosquitoes. When you have mosquitoes that have both, so you have a female mosquito and a male mosquito, and they have the same kind of bacteria inside of their reproductive system. When they mate, the egg and the sperm are able to combine, and then the eggs are able to hatch, and they have little baby culex swimming around and getting ready to become adults, and the cycle keeps going through. But it was found that if a male mosquito has a different type of bacteria or Wolbachia inside of its sperm, when it mates with the female, the sperm and the egg combine, but they're not able to combine correctly. So there's like a timing mismatch happening. So even though they're technically fertilized, there's a sperm and the egg combined, it's non-viable. So it didn't get fertilized all the way. And so there are no baby mosquitoes inside of these eggs. She lays the eggs and they just never hatch. They just lay there and return back into the earth after they get decomposed. And so that is where the whole bacteria swapping comes in. So We took male mosquitoes, not male mosquitoes, we took egg rats from Hawaii. And we sent them over to the continent where they got their bath of antibiotics. So they got rid of all the Wolbachia that is naturally found in them. They were introduced to the incompatible strain or the different strain of Wolbachia, raised up, and just the males are getting sent back to Hawaii so that we can release them into the forest as the most eligible bachelor in the forest to mate with the females. And male and female mosquitoes look very different. And I wish I had my hand slides. I forgot to add this in. But male mosquitoes have super fuzzy antennae, like very, very fuzzy antennae so they can hear the females better with. Around their nose, they have 2 extra big pulps. You guys can't see me over there. They have pulps to be around their the area that they use to drink nectar. And these morphological differences is what we use to help sort them out. So we line them up on a conveyor belt. The camera takes pictures of them and is like, oh, your antennae don't look fuzzy enough. You're too much of a female. So they'll boot them off and only the males of the males walk down that conveyor belt and then come back to us. And so we'll release them in mass. So the reds are the females. And the red with the circle is the female. These are just regular males out there and they have the same strain of Wolbachia. These males are the incompatible males. They're the ones that we brought back. They are our Hawaii ones, but with the incompatible strain. And we have to release them in what's called an overflooding ratio because we want them to be the most eligible bachelor out there. So when the female's like, I'm ready, when they all swarm together, there's a higher chance that she'll mate with one of the incompatible males because females store sperm. They have things in them called spermatheca. They store all the sperm inside of them and then just use that sperm for the rest of their lifetime when they lay eggs. So from after this meeting, the rest of the eggs that this female lays will never hatch and she'll just live her life not having any successful matings, and soon the population will suppress over time. And so we're not going for an eradication. We're not getting rid of mosquitoes. That is not what this project can do or is aimed for. What we are showing is we're going to decrease the amount of mosquitoes in the critical habitats of the birds. So up in Haleakala, up in Koke'e, and soon up on the slopes of Mauna Kea, where it's still too cold for mosquitoes, but soon we know that they will start moving up into those areas. And so we're not the first, like I was saying, this technology has been used around the world for human health. And so these are all the places that has used Wolbachia in some way or form to help control mosquitoes. And so the different mosquitoes that affect human health have different relationships with their Wolbachia and the relationships that the Wolbachia has with disease. So they might not follow a suppression model. Maybe it's more like a population replacement model. But because of the way that we are mosquitoes and bacteria and the relationships that they have, the suppression model is the best for us to control mosquitoes in this space and to be able to suppress them so that the birds can have successful matings and babies and they can grow up to do it all again next year. And so our journey from planning to implementation is taking a lot of steps, and that whole partnership is taking a little bite-sized pieces. So we have the group that is working on mosquitoes and Wolbachia and making the incompatible males. The other group is how do we rear them? How do we get them here? How do we travel from the continent to Hawaii and then from Oahu to the other islands and then from there into the forest? And that comes to deployment. Do we just walk all these mosquitoes out in our backpacks? I don't think that's really that feasible. Do we then hop on helicopters and like open the hatches and let them out? Or do we use drones? And our team is still working and like fine tuning our release methods, but we are looking at everything to be able to get the mosquitoes out, disperse them in a dense enough grid to be able to be more successful in mating with the females that are in this space. And we will have to do it for a very long time. It's not a once and done type of project because, can you see my mouse? Okay. So for example, that blue dot is where we will be releasing the mosquitoes. And so we'll have suppression down there at that little blue dot, but the rest of the island of Maui still has southern house mosquitoes that are still breeding and having the time of their life, so they can still move up the mountain. So we'll have to do these releases to keep a barrier to create that invisible fence line kipuka for these birds up in these habitats. As we continue looking at future technologies and tools for mosquito control at a grander scale, or what are our next steps? This really is a way for us to be able to take a breath, because right now our conservationists are just unable to figure out what are we going to do with these birds and these mosquitoes. If we can't do anything, we can't breathe, we can't think of the next steps. So we're really hoping that this will give us that time. And so just kind of giving a little project timeline, we are here now in 2023. We're happy to say that the Maui environmental assessment had a finding of no significant impact, and we were able to move forward with pilot testings on Maui. We're taking all of that data that we took to help fine tune how we're going to release. We are coming up, we're like actually in the week of the Kauai environmental assessment that is going in front of the Board of Land and Natural Resources on Friday. It currently has a finding of no significant impact. Also, we're just asking the board to approve that finding and to also approve the EA as a whole, so that then we can start doing the pilot releases on Kauai. And then we're going to work towards doing a statewide EA. So these birds, we focus first on Kauai and Maui because that's where the 4 most imperiled birds live. But we have honeykeepers living on Hawaii Island, and we even have 2 that live here on Oahu still. We have the Apapane and the Oahu Amakihi. But we used to have the EEV, and we used to have so many more. So what I'm really excited is that one day with the statewide EA, not only will it be able to expand mosquito control to the outer islands, but within this statewide, it will also address the mosquitoes that harm humans. So this is an environmental assessment that is going to address human health and bird health. And I find that really fascinating and amazing of that marrying of the two, that we are both being affected by diseases by mosquitoes, and that this technology can help us both. Not saying that we'll have EEV back here soon, but one day, hopefully in the future, we will be able to bring them back, or they'll just fly back on their own. The redbirds like to fly a lot more than the non-redbirds. So I kind of really focus a lot on the sciencey bits, the technology bits, the regulatory bits, which are all important and very important, but I love the community bits. I love the story bits. I love being able to connect people with each other, because it's really hard to love something and want to protect something and give a lot of money to something if you don't have a relationship with them. And so I'm going to show you the the Akiopola'au, which is so amazing what they can do with their beak. When I first saw this bird, I was like, oh, it definitely sips on nectar, but no, it does not. It is able to move its mandibles and take that bottom beak and hammer it into like a woodpecker, and then we'll take the top one and fish it out. And they actually will be with their kids for the longest out of all the Hawaiian honeykeepers, because they have to teach them how to hammer into the wood, how to grab the grubs out of there. How do you know when there's a grub in that wood that you are on? Because there's hoa trees all over the forest, so being able to find the right ones. And so they have maybe one kid every year and a half or so. So if you think about if the parents disappear, then that kid doesn't be able to have that instruction. And is that kid going to grow up in time to be able to have more kids? And can they teach the next generation? Whereas the mosquito is going to come through and break that mind. So let's get that. No, that's not what I wanted. And so the relationships we're talking about span everybody, all communities, whether we have hula practitioners, hula dancers, hunters that go out into the forest, our elected officials, and just community organizations that have Aina and Malama Aina in their hearts. And so we went out to them to talk with them to see what kind of relationships do they have, what kind of relationships do they think that they can have into the future if we're able to work together to address the mosquito populations. And so at first, when I started this job, we were still kind of the tail end of COVID restrictions. So it was all online. I went online, I did online presentations. We went into social media and figured out, let's go where the communities are. But over time, we were able to actually do outreach, and we went to outreach at places that were not conservation focused, because we love our conservation crew and I love our conservation community, but we know you know. We know you guys know what to do, what's going on, have these relationships, but we wanted to get to more. We needed to be able to speak to everybody because these birds are important to everybody. These birds are important to us to have forests, to be able to have water. If we don't have the forest, don't have water, we can't live here in the middle of an island, in the middle of the ocean. What's that? I'm gonna try to see if I can turn it. And then we were through fostering relationships. We did a couple of things. Last year, we worked with a bunch of schools across the 4 counties to pass August 8th as a day to celebrate Hawaiian honey creepers. So we had over 2,000 students submit testimony. Some of them even came into the building to walk in front. I would have never done that. But they came up and walked in front and gave testimony together. They were in 2nd grade doing that. We had kids give testimony in Olelo, Hawaii, and it was beautiful and amazing. And just talking about this relationship with these birds that most of them have never seen, but they want to have, and they know, and they're enamored by these birds. And then working with, so I'm a student of Palau'uhia, and a lot of other students, a lot of other coworkers of mine are also students of Palau'uhia, and it's been amazing being able to incorporate those cultural lessons that we learn and how to implement Hawaii life ways into conservation and kind of trying to bridge that science with culture aspect. And so one of those things that came out is that both on Kauai and on Maui, we were able to help and participate in aha or in ceremonies to set intentions for what we're doing. So kind of like you just don't go to, well, maybe you do, but you don't go to like your grandparents' house or somebody and just like bust open the door and you're like, I'm here, I'm ready to rearrange your whole living room. You kind of let them know, you give them a call ahead of time, you stop at the front of the driveway and you're like, hi, I'm here, okay, let's do this together. So that's what these ahas were for, to not only set intention for us, but to set intentions for the forest and the birds and the plants that live in there and be like, hi, we are here, we're gonna do this. Let's do it together, and we're here to help you. And also that came out is this hula. Let me see if I can. No? Okay, maybe not. I'll send it to you guys. But this hula is called Namanu Eha, and it was created by a halau on Kauai. And they wrote a song to pair the birds with their habitats. And this was all through inspiration of this halau working with Kauai forest birds over the years and being able to have these relationships with the birds that they never saw. Maybe they did see most of them back in the day before they start to disappear, but to create these cultural stories now, not just stories that we are reviving from the past, but stories that we're building today to help inform into the future. And so I wanted to share a little bit of the story that I have been a part of. There's this group called Ahui Manu, and I love it because it's kind of named after the place where I'm from. And it just means a gathering of birds. And we are both bird scientists, bird nerds, cultural practitioners, just anybody and everybody who has a bird kind of like thumping in their hearts. And we come together and we talk about what are we seeing in the birds? What are their behaviors? What's going on? How can we help protect them? And something that came out of it is like, we would love to be able to compose a song for them. So we took inspiration from the Kumulipo, and there's that passage that goes through where it talks about, here's the apapane, and then came the alaiula, and it kind of pairs a lot of like birds with birds or sea creatures with sea creatures. But when we looked at those pairing, we realized that he's doing all right. So we're like, okay, let's instead take the birds and pair them with somebody from the sea and somebody from the skies or from the Aina who are doing well, and that they can all work together and share their essence with one another to help bring them into abundance. And so, yeah, I'd love to share with you guys. We do meet, I think like once every 4 weeks. We're in the midst of having our ahas or our seasonal celebrations, and we would love to invite you guys to come. But yes. O ka lelea ne au na o ka hakaia la la ne o no a ka aina o Hawaii kuauli o ula ka makua puka kana kehi he manu aina lele hana ka akikiki Kia I ia e ke u kiki no hoikai. Ola maolo I ka umi ko no hui uka. O ka a kiki au na lelea pa hia. Hana ka kirikiu, kiu. Kia I ia e ka o hiku hiu no huikai. Ola maolo I ka kanabau no hui uka. O ka kirikiu au na lelea pa hia. Hana ka a ke Kia I ia e ke no hui kai. Ola maolo I ka po a aha no hui uka. O ka a ke au na lelea pa hia. Hana ka a kohe, tra. Kia I ia e ke lai ni no hui kai. Ola maolo I ke kohe no hui uka. Ola, sorry. Hana ka o kohe. Kia I ke lai ni no hui kai. Ola maolo I ka o kohe. No hui ka au na lea pa hia. O na manulele au na mai kana loa ai ka hakai. Mai ka hakai ai ke alo ka mauna. Ua kua ola. Ola papa lua. Ola ka naka I ka lau hui manu. A mau e ha. Ie. Holo e. And so thank you for listening. And this is really trying to be like, we can do it. Like, I am not trained in Olelo Hawaii, I'm not trained in Oli, but we can practice and we can try and we can do it. And this is one way. You've heard of a sweat equity, where you go into the aina and you like sweat it all out and that's your exchange. This is a way we can exchange the way that the birds exchange. We're exchanging with our voice, with our leo and singing out as the birds would sing out and trying to reconnect us all together again. I'm not going to play this. I'll play it after, but this is kind of my call to you guys to raise your voices for the BLNR Kauai environmental assessment. It takes a lot and we're very busy. And even it's my job to do community engagement, things like that, following all these environmental assessments, submitting testimony on all the things that are happening around Hawaii for both our watersheds, our plants, our birds, takes a lot of time. But they need our voices. They need especially our voices, the ones that went to school, the ones that have the training, the ones that have the vocabulary to change the minds of our elected officials, the ones who can go on far and swat down misinformation and not let the public get swayed because of news of lasers coming down from the heavens to scorch things, or news of that these bioweapons are happening or things like that. We take a lot on. I know we do as conservationists, especially here in Hawaii. A lot of the species that we're working with are on the brink of extinction or are about to disappear. And it takes a lot of out of us, especially when our cups aren't always full. But if we don't do something, then we can't get our friends to do something. And if we don't lead, then those who look to us because of our expertise, because of the hours that we put into this, aren't going to do anything either, because they're going to be like, oh, if Luca's not submitting testimony, it must not be important enough that my sister's not going to submit testimony, or she's not going to get her partner to. But I go on and I'm like, hi, Luca, not Luca, I'm Luca. Hi, Marika, submit testimony. Make sure that you're telling Lena to submit testimony. Make sure you're telling that, because I am a trusted source, because I have that training, I have that knowledge that they know that they can, because she doesn't have the time to do all the research either. So I am her source. And so I'm just imploring for you guys to also be that source for your friends and your family, and to use your voice to be able to do more than just write scientific papers, which are really important, but be able to translate your scientific papers in a way that people can understand and in a way that people will walk away. Because I know you guys will walk away with me sounding off all the bird names. And if that's all you come away from this, and that's what a lot of, like, if I go to presentations and all that people get away from that is that there's this cool bird that has a mohawk and it goes kohe kohe chonk chonk. That sparks interest. And then they're gonna be like, oh, what bird is that? It's like, oh, I don't know. I had this weird name. Let's go look. And then they can go down that rabbit hole and go on that journey on their own. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to me for everything, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll leave this up real quick, but then I'm gonna swap back to a bird video because they're a lot more fun to watch.